Welcome back to the Energy Sovereignty Project and our closeout for our third month, March. And so we're going to keep the same format. For those of you that haven't seen this before, these closeout videos are done so that we do 1 day each minute. In this case, we'll be doing 31 days in 32 minutes. That way, if you don't want to listen to me bloviate, you can just go to each minute of the video and find that corresponding day. So with that said, let's get to it. All right, well, March was interesting. It got us out of, as we started to get out of February, we started to see more regular days where the solar contribution was more reliable. So obviously what you've got here is a typical rainy day. We had a little bit of maintenance that'll show up here. So like you can see, we had a brief inspection by SMUD. They were looking for the labeling, just to make sure all the labels were correct. And then for that, they actually to check and make sure that what was being said was there. They had to have the house shut down so they could check a few things. So we recorded that as a maintenance day. And on the second here, again, got some rainy day production, 7.7 kilowatt hours. Usage of the home right around 20. Again, even though it's early spring, it's cloudy weather, so we weren't seeing any heat. So no AC yet. And we notice our total solar day percentage is only 9. So this just goes over that. We had our repair crews out as well to deal with some of the debris outside. And here we go, March 3rd. Note the percentage at first solar contribution, 0. And so if you look down there, you'll see the daily from the grid. That was 7.7 kilowatts, and that's the most that we've drawn in a long time. Most of this time of year has been spent on zombie apocalypse mode. And then the production in the 20 kilowatt range. And then obviously no miles to the vehicle. And then here you can see that the system was set to 0% reserve to allow it to deplete all the way. And then we just barely didn't make it. And so we needed about 7 kilowatt hours to get us through. And then on March 4th, we're into that partly cloudy situation. And so the production comes back up, 31.1 kilowatt hours of production, and then that brought our total solar day percentage back up to 35. And you can see the contribution, the percentage at first solar contribution is 5%. So even though we had a decent day the previous day, we barely made it. And again, still nothing to be able to send to the vehicle. And this is what we had spoken about in that update video, talking about what we'd learned from our previous past couple of months about how to set the system. And then March 5th, very rainy day. Rainy day contribution, 9.1 kilowatt hours. Brought our total solar day to 15%, which is traditionally barely enough to get us through the evening. And then the 6th, we had some decent production during the day from 11 to 2 or so, before it started to become quite rainy and windy that evening. So we managed to get 25.1 kilowatt hours, and again, that's owing to the time of the year. We have quite a high production this time of year in clear weather, and so anytime it does clear up, you wind up seeing quite a boost, and the notes bear that out. We exceeded the expected production of about 15 kilowatt hours, and that was mostly due to when the weather came through. It was mostly clear from that 11 o'clock to 1 or 2 o'clock period. And March 7th, another rainy day, pretty decent production, basically matching what the home used. And then still nothing to send to the vehicle. And no notes, as that was just kind of a boring rainy day. Good day to sit around and watch the wind and rain. I should do hand puppets for these boring note section. And the 8th, and again, this is rainy weather, but if those breaks come through at just the right time, at 11 o'clock to 2 or 3 o'clock, you can do the vast majority of your production right then, and that's exactly what happened here. Total solar day percentage of 38, so we're creeping up. No appreciable grid power used. Someone else had mentioned about the amount of power that was showing that we were using. And there's a strange little anomaly that I'm trying to figure out about how the gateway records that. And I'll do a future episode on it where we try and tease out what those little errors mean, because they do add up, but it doesn't really mean anything on a day-to-day basis. The only way you can get rid of it is to actually turn the grid off. And here we've got another pretty decent day, 22 kilowatt hours. Total solar day of 31%, so we're holding our own. And like the note says, just system holding in equilibrium, basically producing what we're using. No extra yet to toss into the car. And then of course we have daylight savings time. Rainy weather. Pretty decent contribution though, 37 kilowatt hours. Home use 22, so that allowed us to build up a little bit in the system. So you can see the total solar day percentage ended at 42%. And again, all the asterisks there are obviously due to the daylight savings time, because now in all of the notes that follow, all the days that follow, we have that shift, right? And so we have to make sure to take that into account if we're using that as a point of reference. Some of you are copying this information down as part of your own spreadsheets, and this will introduce an error if you're keeping track of how the times of day are shifting. So be sure you correct for that. March 11th. Now we're starting to see some impact from, again, the time of year and getting that extended time of day where it's clear. So we got a 46.6 kilowatt hour contribution. That brought our total solar day up to 65%. And the 65% is an interesting thing to take note of, because that means that we are actually in danger the following day of peaking the system out. And then, like the note says, it was kind of a hazy day. It wasn't actually what one would consider a sunny day. It was why it was listed as partly cloudy. Most of that decision gets made by looking at the weather reports and how much the percentage of cloud cover was predicted, but then I also correct that on the day to make sure that it's representational of what is actually occurring. It doesn't matter if the forecast says that it's going to be partly cloudy. If the sun's out all day and we've got a completely smooth peak, then it'll get recorded as a sunny day. Again, here we go, 37.5 kilowatt hours of production. Nothing to the vehicle yet. Had a little high use in the home, so that managed to maintain that system percentage. And the 13th. Good production. Benchmark day pretty much. 48.9 kilowatt hours. So this, you'd be able to use this as a benchmark day. I should actually come up with a symbol for that, shouldn't I? I suppose that would be handy for people to know. And now our total solar day percentage is 92%. And so we better be thinking about where we're going to be putting that power. As the notes say, days are getting longer, so that amount of drop in the evening is continuing to reduce. It's now no longer 20%, it's generally in the 16 to 18% range. And then on March 14th, as you can see, boom, let's put some miles in the car. And needed them too. Did 90.3 miles of driving that day. And then you can see here we've altered how we show the daily home use, where we show the breakout, how much was used by the home, how much was used by the vehicle, and then in total. Now here we have the vehicle information, how much charge was put to the vehicle, its start of day odometer reading. That's going to be important for you to mark and to tease out how many miles the car actually did on sunlight. So basically you use the following day, so we'll use the 15th closeout and then that will determine how many miles were actually driven the previous day. Best way to calculate that out. And then the 15th, 91 miles. Excuse me, 19 miles. Got that reversed. And this is actually my typical mileage for the car. Is around in that 20 to 30, about 20 really, 20 average or so, or 20 usual. But then I'll go ahead and occasionally stuff, 100 or 200 miles on the vehicle in a day or 2 days, and that brings that whole total average up to somewhere around 30 miles, probably somewhere between 25 and 30 miles. 16 kilowatt hours to the vehicle, showing the start and end times, or miles and percentage. And the 16th, again, we've got that breakout, 50 miles driven today. And again, now we're in zombie apocalypse mode too. I should have made note of that. That's mention of that earlier. That was done, I think, on the 14th. We went back on zombie apocalypse mode. And that really helps us make the determination on the vehicle as far as making sure that everybody knows that the vehicle is drawing only from the solar, only from sunlight. March 17th, 85 miles driven. And as you see here on the total solar day percentage, sometimes I'll have two of them on there. A lot of that is somewhat random. I try to be as diligent as I can about making sure that I'm there to catch it, but sometimes it's just not practical. Sometimes I'll have to start a charge before the system will peak. There's a lot of different reasons why sometimes that total solar day number, basically it should just be taken as a reference point for will the home make it through the evening. And as we move forward in this, I'll try to become more regular with how I charge the vehicle, probably plugging it in before midnight and setting the vehicle to charge after midnight. But again, it's a car, I need it, so it gets charged when it gets charged and used when it gets used. Here again, showing the breakout, the total solar day percentage of 56%. And yeah, that's important to remember as well. I'm not, you'll see sometimes, days like here where I've only put on 9.1 miles. I'm not driving the car because I need sunlight or need to save it for the house. I'm driving the amount that I'm driving. And again, here we're talking about that 60% mark. That generally means that we'll be able to get past 3 days of rainy weather. And that just kind of so happens that that's basically what you wind up getting in the forecast. As far as what you can really predict. So if you've got, if you're looking at the forecast, you can really honestly say that the next 3 days are going to be what they are. And then on the 19th here, we had a brief interruption as SMUD came back to try and correct for some of the things that were noted. Excuse me, not SMUD, but SunWorks came back to address a couple of the things that were noted by SMUD. And the interruption was brief, but it was there. Vehicle information on the top, basically 7 kilowatt hours. We're just trying to replenish the vehicle with what was used that day. And the 20th was another maintenance day. Again, our solar provider SunWorks was working with SMUD to try and sort out a couple of issues. The system wasn't down for long, but again, if it's being messed with and it's not 100%, then we record it as a maintenance day. Good production. 28 kilowatt hours to the vehicle. We're starting to try and raise its total charge here. First, 61.7 miles driven. Grid's still disconnected. And the notes for that day: good production. "64 miles the following day." But now what you'll see here is that we didn't put any miles to the vehicle. We purposely depleted it down to 60%. Actually, 60% was our target. We managed to, we wound up going a little bit below that, hit 56. And again, that's due to those rainy days that were predicted. And here what we're doing is we're using the large capacity of the battery in the car to be able to drive it for several days. And then that takes the load off of the vehicle. "23rd. And we're back to charging the vehicle a little bit. "15 kilowatt hours to the vehicle." Other vehicle data. "24th, another good production day." Starting to add more to the vehicle, another 15 kilowatt hours. And here you can see the vehicle state. We only drove 14 miles. And so that allowed us to put a few additional miles, about 50 additional miles onto the 40 additional miles or so onto the onto the car. Fifth. Rainy day production, 17.5 kilowatt hours. Nothing to the vehicle. And again, we're looking for that 50% or 60% at the total solar day to get us past 3 days, and we didn't make it. But the system's still holding its own, and the driving wasn't excessive, so I didn't need to draw down the system. And again, no charge to the vehicle. But we're back up to that 60%. Give us our comfort margin to get past the next couple of days of rainy weather. And again, on that third day, when you're looking at the forecast, you're not really sure whether or not that's going to be as bad as they say. Fourth day, same thing. Fifth day, same thing. So on a 5-day forecast, you're really kind of unsure of those last couple of days. And so here you'll see that our normal target for 3 days is 60%. And so 40 is 2 days, and we did that because on the 29th we were predicted to have good weather. And so here we're starting to deplete the system a little bit. 15% went to the vehicle. And the idea there is that we now don't need to make it 3 days. We know that we're going to have some decent production on the 19th. Or 29th rather, 19th. The 28th. We know that tomorrow is going to be a fairly decent production day, and so then we're able to deplete it another 15 kilowatt hours, make sure that we have plenty in the vehicle in case we need to drive around. And here we have the 29th. The 29th and 30th were interesting because I had a round trip, day trip that I was planning. Another 12 kilowatt hours into the vehicle. And on the 30th, this is going to get a little busy. So you'll see on the charge to the vehicle 30 kilowatt hours, and that was because I wanted to bring the vehicle up to 90% before I left it in the evening, and then on the morning of the 31st the vehicle would be set to charge to 100% just before I set out. Ran a few errands that day, so that brought the total end day miles to 204 miles, 82%. And so again, now here on the 31st, it gets a little busy. So you'll notice the daily home usage that represents two charge periods. One in the early morning and then one in the evening when I returned. And you'll also see that there's a supercharger session there. That was at the Corte Madera supercharger. I did a quick bump charge just to make sure I wasn't going to have to push the car up the driveway. And then the notes bear that out. And that's it. The takeaway for this month, obviously, is basically our awakening from winter. We still have a situation where the weather is still quite unpredictable, throws us a lot of curves. And so, though we were able to do a considerable amount of driving, as you could see, there were several days in there where it was a real nail biter. If we had had a trip come up where we needed to drive a greater distance, then we would have to put charge in the vehicle from somewhere else, from grid power or from a supercharger or some other source. But the days are getting longer, and it's really exciting to see how much driving now that we're actually able to do on nothing but sunlight, and how many days in a row we're actually able to keep the home on zombie apocalypse mode, off the grid entirely. So thanks for joining in with this. I know that several of you had waited a long time for this month 3 closeout, and I wish all of you the best of luck with your own systems. And if this is the kind of thing that interests you, feel free to like and subscribe. We'd love to have you follow along with this madness. And we'll see you shortly with the end of the first week of April.